Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Well, edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We're going to have a great show for you today. Today we have a very, very special guest that I think you're going to like. He's a documentary producer, but before we get there, you know COVID-19 is the thing. And earlier today, I interviewed another John Perkins. I'll have that interview more than likely on Monday. He's an activist, a former big wheel, meets with many heads of states and the World Bank and all of that kind of stuff. And he wrote a book a while back called, I think it's a Confessions of a Hitman or something like that. He's an economic hitman, actually, because when he talks about what goes on, you'll see what I'm talking about. But anyhow, what I'm going to do, first of all, is I'm going to play the COVID-19, a piece of the COVID-19 presser today, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. So let me go ahead and do that, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
You have a question for the doctors on childcare?
Sure.
On the campaign, it really does sound, though, like you're saying do as we say, not as we do. You're telling people to listen to local officials, but in Tulsa you defied local health officials to have an event that, even though you say it didn't result in a spike, dozens of Secret Service agents, dozens of campaign staffers are now quarantined after positive tests. And then in Arizona, one of the hardest hit states, you packed a church with young people who weren't wearing masks. So how can you say that the campaign is not part of the problem that Dr. Fauci laid out?
Well, I want to remind you again that the freedom of speech and the right to peaceably assemble is enshrined in the Constitution of the United States. And even in a health crisis, the American people don't forfeit our constitutional rights. And working with state officials, as we did in Oklahoma and as we did in Arizona, we're creating settings where people can choose to participate in the political process, and we'll continue to do that. I think it's really important that we recognize how important freedom and personal responsibility are to this entire equation, but allowing younger Americans to understand, particularly in the counties that are most impacted, the unique challenges that we're facing in their age group, we think is important. But look, it's so important that we recognize that as we issued guidance to reopen America now 2 months ago, and now as all 50 states are opening up our country again, people are going back to work, American everyday life is being restored kind of one step, one day at a time. I think it's important that we remind ourselves this is not a choice between the health of the American people and a strong economy. There are profound health implications to the lockdowns through which we just passed. I heard a statistic not long ago at a task force briefing that in one jurisdiction there'd been a 50% increase in the number of people presenting at emergency rooms having attempted suicide. I mean, there are profound mental health issues. There are profound economic issues, people needing to be back to work. And so our objective here today is just to make sure the American people know in 34 states, the cases are largely stable, and there's no combination of rising cases and rising positivity rates. That's a tribute to the American people. And in the 16 states we're focused on today, we simply want to equip particularly young people with the knowledge of the part that they can play in stemming the rising tide of new cases, not because the coronavirus represents a significant threat to them. In most cases, it doesn't if you're a younger American, but because no younger American would ever want to spread the coronavirus to someone who would have a serious outcome. But I'm grateful for the time today. We hope this has been helpful. And we'll be back. More information as time goes on.
Now think about that answer. They are having a meeting today. The disingenuousness of that news conference, I need to first tell you. They're hitting this thing that says only 3% of counties in the United States are actually spiking. And while that is true, the reality is that is where people live. Most counties around this country are empty wastelands, or I shouldn't call them wastelands, but they're empty counties. They're not counties with a lot of people. So when they talk about 3% of counties is where the spikes are occurring, well, you talk about Houston, Miami, LA, and all these other places, that's where most of your population is. And the spikes are occurring because of the negligence of government. So we know that. So the thing about it is, for all of us that are out there listening to these types of messages, it's imperative that we don't, if we're on Facebook, if we are on Twitter, if we are on Tumblr, or if we're just talking to people and you hear somebody make those silly statements, please correct them. Let them know that 3% of counties, what that means is probably half of the population. That's where they are. I don't know if it's half the population, but it's pretty darn close. Let people understand what we're talking about here, because what the administration is doing right now is not only wrong, it is dangerous, and it's killing people. And I am not concerned about saying that. The administration is killing people. And let's make all our friends understand that. Our administration is killing people. All right. I mentioned a statement. I spoke to, look up who John Perkins is. John Perkins, he's an author, wrote 10 books. I'm going to feature him on Monday. But we had a long conversation today. And what was the interesting thing about it is that we discussed in detail not only capitalism, not only COVID-19, but we touched on an issue. That COVID-19, things generally happen, and I use the phrase from one of his pieces that I want to use here. What I did with this phrase is try to get him to. He made a statement that was very prescient. He said, "Life is composed of a series of coincidences over which we have no control. Once we are presented with such coincidences, we give choices. How we respond, the actions we take in the face of coincidences makes all the difference." Why am I saying that? If you take a look at exactly how our reaction was with COVID-19, and you take a look at China, and you take a look at the EU, they all took care of their people, meaning they didn't put their people in dire straits. None of their people are sitting down wondering if they will be bankrupt tomorrow. None of their people are sitting back there wondering what are they going to do for health care. So that's what China, the European Union did. Their people are taken care of. We have depression-style work issues now. Our workforce has an unemployment rate, depression levels. In the EU, and I even heard a thing on China today, they have high unemployment because people have to social distance and people can't work in confined units either. But none of them are concerned about their future. None of them are concerned that somehow this pandemic will have a material defect on their entire, for the prognosis for the rest of their lives. But for COVID-19 and American citizens, they don't know. Because the erratic government that we have and the erratic portion of the Republican Party and the neoliberal portion of the Democratic Party, they have no answers for Americans. They aren't saying, we are going to make you whole. They're all saying, we are going to make those guys on the top whole, and it may trickle down to you. And if you take a look at what has happened over every single shock that we've had, and we haven't had a shock like coronavirus, but if you have taken a look at what happened every shock, the middle class has declined and declined and declined and has never ever recovered back into the growth of the 60s and 70s. Never. We constantly help the top, and they take the spoils and they give the pittance to everybody else. That is what happens. So this guy is not necessarily an anti-capitalist, but he has acknowledged that this is what capitalism has done. And he acknowledges all the things that need to be done to mitigate all of this. But the one thing we spoke about when we went into Central America and these other places is that while China is out building, he just came back from Panama and Nicaragua. China is building in Panama. China is building in Nicaragua. China is building in South America. China is giving stipends, giving monies, investing in these people. Is China any better than any other imperial power? No, they're not. But what they have done is learn from the United States. And in doing so, they have learned how to best get into these people's domains, into these people's good grace, into these people, and work for these people. And in doing so, they are making a difference. They're making a difference. So when I talk about, is COVID-19 going to be that nail in the coffin of this U.S. empire? It is pretty darn conceivable that instead of having the United States as the sole pole and all the other major powers right under, that we have a dual-poled world in which the European Union and China dominates as the United States simply believes it is still a superpower, believes it is still in control as they go on and live their lives among each other. That's why you see Australia and New Zealand and all these guys, they have different pacts with China. They have different pacts with Europe. The United States now is not their big central concern anymore. So again, we better start being cognizant that the days where we were known to be omnipotent, and let me be frank. I don't know if it's a bad thing that that we have shared power. The only issue I have with it is as follows: we are talking political power here. What supersedes political power, however, is corporate power. And what it really means is that the corporate centralization just moves from the United States to some other places. In other words, it's still going to remain corporate power, but the places where are demanded from, where we get issues from the corporations per se, just won't be centralized in the United States any longer. But anyhow, with that, let's go ahead and move on to Kevin Bowe, and we'll take it on the other side. Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Right. I'm Egberto Will is your host. Thank you so kindly for being with us. We are here with documentary producer Kevin Bowe. Kevin Bowe, I met Kevin Bowe at Netroots Nation, I believe, 2019. How are you doing, Kevin?
Well, I'm about as hot as I am last July.
Oh, yes, it was hot, but it's not Netroots if it's not hot. Even
no, unfortunately, it's not
Netroots right now.
But thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So anyhow, you came up with a new documentary, The American Spring, and first, before we go into the technicalities of the documentary, what I love about what you did is that it seems like you understand something very important about the current level of the current attention span of Americans in this time. So you didn't make it a very long documentary. Tell me a little bit about how you did this.
Sure, sure. Well, you got to learn the hard way, right? My first work was Democracy Through the Looking Glass, which was a look at the 2016 election. I got to cover Trump in his first, few weeks in the New Hampshire primary and saw firsthand. But, it was your standard 75-minute long piece, and got a lot of good feedback at the festivals. Didn't get bought by HBO or anything like that, and so it just sat there. And a lot of the activists would like to, saw it and were excited, but it's a really big ask a lot of times to ask people to watch for a full 60 minutes or 70 minutes, and if you then want to engage conversation and call to action ideas, it's a 2 or 3 hour event. So I decided to take an equally big problem. How do we try to change the power dynamics in the country? But break it down into small bits so that people can digest it. So it's a series of 10-minute documentaries, so that people either online can move on to something else. They don't have to prepare their entire night, or even better, if grassroots people are going to have meetings around the country, whether online or whatever, this is a great way, a new tool to bring in new members. To show 10 minutes, have a discussion, move on to other business, or even better, because it's a multiple series. I got 3 10-minute breakups. We got a half hour of content, and soon I'll have about 60 minutes of content. So if you wanted to have a big event, if you wanted to have, a panel with that, that big 3 hour event of discussion, you can do that. But if you also wanted to just, have a bunch of people over to talk about some reform politics, and then, maybe you're working on a local initiative on gerrymandering reform, or maybe there's a local, any of the political interests, show a 10-minute, not rah-rah, but, show a 10-minute piece that's going to inform people and really motivate people to show that people can make a difference and get them to act locally. So yeah, I designed it as 10 minutes to make it more usable in today's world.
All right, Kevin, and that is great. I think that was a good choice because, with the amount of work people have going around, having those little 10-minute increments, start, stop, you created that good start, stop for them. You currently have 3 of them out, but before, let's talk a little bit about the problems in society, the problem in America as you see it right now, because I think the problems are more serious than many of us think. And I like the first 3 segments that you have out. I think is where things really have to begin, because unless they begin there, and I imagine that's the reason why you chose those 3 topics as the beginning. So tell me, what is the problem as you see today?
Sure. I guess at 60,000 feet, because that's where, documentary people, kind of live. It really, unfortunately, can be summed up in 3 words, lack of trust. Nobody trusts anybody. People don't trust politicians. They're not trusting the police. They're not trusting the media. We're not trusting each other. And, I think this lack of trust has really been, we all talk about a rigged system. And there's lots of things, a game is played based on how the rules are. The outcome of a game is really shaped by the rules. And I am tackling, doing 10-minute pieces on the different rules that if they were changed, they can create more trust, they can create less negative politics. And so the first, not necessarily any order, but one of them looks at money in politics. And, to me, that's the biggest. And I really focus on getting money out of political campaigns. Because again, back to trust. Everybody knows, or certainly assumes, that the politicians can be bought. And even if they can't be bought, the politicians have got to spend 30-40% of their time raising money. And so when we structure the rules of the game, where the way you get ahead in politics is just by asking rich people for money, or worse, or not worse, or being a rich person with money, you change the outcome. You know, you're only going to have people that are catering to special interests or are part of, you know, the rich themselves. So we need to have public financing of campaigns to change the power structure so that more middle-class people, people of color, working class people can actually, you know, afford to run a campaign. Because I live in Massachusetts, you know, to run for the state legislature, just in the lowest state representative, that's $50,000. And state senate is 200,000. And then, you know, many places around the country, you know, we all know a congressional seat, you're going to have to raise $1 million, $2 million, you know, minimum. So that those rules block out so many people. And if we could change those rules, we'd have a whole lot more people running for office, and we would be changing that power dynamic. So that's one of the subjects I looked at.
It's interesting because when you talk about money in politics, we know about Citizens United and people calling money is speech. And I think, you know, how do you why is it that you can determine how much any one person can spend on any one election? I think it's important to note that a democracy requires that everybody participates, and money, that somebody's excess freedom can impinge on yours. And that's something that you're saying in respect to attempting to call money free speech?
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole money in politics, there's lots of layers of the issue. Certainly, money is speech on Citizens United, and you know, certainly that's one element of it. Specifically in my piece, I looked at a program in Connecticut, and there's a program like this in Maine, and there's a program similar to in Arizona, and there's other programs similar around the country where you only have to raise a small amount of money, $5,000 to run for state representative, for instance. And that allows you or qualifies you to get $30,000 so that you can run a political campaign without going to all these rich people and asking them for money. So while the money in speech is certainly, you know, a question, unfortunately, for the Supreme Court, there are other programs right now that are working, that are in place, that you know, I wish people would talk more about and would try to get past.
But let me cut you there, because there's an important question there. So I think you are saying you are willing to go around what the restrictions that not the restrictions, but the over benevolence that we have right now with rich people being able to give to campaigns, as long as they pass policies that allow the regular guy to raise the minimum required to actually have an effective campaign.
Yeah, as long as we've got Citizens United. I mean, you know, we've got to attack money in politics on a couple of different levels. Clearly, you know, a constitutional amendment or a more friendly Supreme Court is the only way we're going to overcome, you know, money is speech and all that kind of stuff. And ultimately, that's the solution. But in the meantime, we can have voluntary programs. You're right. You know, let the big guys write the $3 million checks. But like, so for instance, there's a program in Seattle, and it's been proposed around the country called democracy vouchers, democracy bucks, something like that, where each citizen would have $25, $50, $100 that they could give to any campaign they wanted to, and they'd get a tax credit on it. You know, it would wash out. It's basically public money, but each taxpayer gets to decide who they want to donate to. So, you know, a lot of libertarian-oriented people like that approach because it doesn't involve, you know, government handing out grants, which is similar to some other programs. So in that system, yes. The idea would be that 1 million people with $25 vouchers will be able to match, you know, the 25 people that write the $1 million checks. Not the most ideal thing, but until we get Citizens United overturned some way, that might be the world we have to live in for a little bit.
Yeah, Citizens United and quite a bit more. McCutcheon and a few others as well that are
Yes.
there impinging. You know, Citizens United is what everybody talks about. They forget about McCutcheon and others. Now, let's go ahead and talk about what you came up with, the first three, because when I went over your first of all, I went over to your site, looked at the trailer, and then I saw that the three that you started with, and I was pretty happy about that. You took care of gerrymandering, campaign financing reform, and ranked choice voting. I mean, you started out with democracy, voting, clean up the voting system. And if you have a clean voting system, people can feel like the persons they want to get involved in with the election will be the ones elected. So why don't we start out by talking a little bit about ranked choice voting? What do you mean by that? A lot of people don't understand exactly what that is.
Sure, absolutely. And just even to take a step back a little bit, because, while ranked choice voting is a more popular alternative, there's a few other systems that are being tested out around the country, approval voting and things like that. And even to take a step back again, we with a two-party system wherein many people aren't happy with that, it's the lesser of two evils. There's not a lot of voices there, and also if we want a third-party choice, we have a dilemma. We really want to vote for somebody else. They more reflect either on the right or on the left of who you are, but you can't vote for them because you're afraid that you'll be wasting your vote and the candidate you really hate will win. So, instead of voting for the candidate you want to win or you'd like to win, but you don't think they can win, you vote for this. So we all feel that, people on the left, people on the right. And so we got that spoiler. Or we even have some situations like in primaries or in a general election where there's three candidates running. Somebody wins a primary with 30% of the vote. And if you're a Democrat and it's a strong blue district, that means if it's congressional seat, that means somebody gets 30% of a primary vote and basically becomes untouchable as an incumbent, whether it's a Republican district or a Democratic district. So there's something unfair about that when it comes to democracy, when such a few group of voters can make that difference. And in a general election, there's been cases where people win as governor with 45% of the vote, 40% of the vote. And, back to trust. Well, who trusts a candidate or who believes in a candidate that doesn't win a majority? How can you govern a state or whatever if they're not supported by the majority of the people? So ranked choice voting is a way that solves that. It's a way that allows you to vote for third-party candidates without creating a spoiler. And it allows a way to have kind of a runoff and decide between three candidates and find somebody who more than 50% prefer. So, those are the benefits. And I think a lot of people, most voters, have been in those kind of dilemmas that I described. So what's the solution? Ranked choice voting. Well, it's exactly that. You have a ballot of, let's say, 4 candidates, and you get to rank them 1, 2, 3, 4. The first vote is your one. On the first ballot, everyone counts the ballots, counts the votes. And even if there's 4 candidates, if one of the candidates wins 50% of the vote, the election's over. Simple as that. But if the candidates get, 40%, 30%, 20%, 10%, I'm not going to do my math very well here. The candidates at the bottom who got the smallest amount of votes, they are eliminated from the counting. And their second choice candidate vote is then reapplied to the people that still exist. So by process of elimination, eventually you will get a winner with 50% of the vote. And you can say with confidence that that candidate has is the preference of the majority of the people. They're not the the tried and true. They don't have 40% of people that will walk off a bridge for them. They got 50% or 51% of people that believe in them.
In that scenario, somebody, let's say I got 45% and you got 35%.
Yep.
And there are other candidates. It could be that you are the ultimate winner, right? Even though I came out with the most first place vote.
And generally what will happen, just to play that out, is, you've got your 45%, but it's kind of a hard, extreme 45%, although 45% you can't be too extreme.
Right.
But the other, or you could be the more progressive, I could be the more middle person, and the two people below me might reflect me,
Right.
So those candidates would tend to support me as a second vote. And you might not grow your 45% because most of those other voters of those other candidates, they
Right.
like me better. And that's why ranked choice voting is so good, because you open that up maybe by design, because it's at this point, it's about, if we're running hard against each other and we know that we've got two other candidates that aren't going to get they're not going to win, but they're going to get a fair share of votes. You and I are going to try to appeal to their voters. You and I are going to maybe, it's a kind of a race. I don't want to say a race to the middle, but it's a race towards consensus.
Actually, that is a better term, a race to consensus. Race to the middle is a terrible phrase, but
yes,
race
absolutely.
to consensus is actually what we are looking for.
I'm going to use it because that's what it is. And I nothing to the middle.
Nothing to the middle. that calls for no action, no moving forward,
But and the positive thing about this ranked choice election, again, it could go to the advantage of anybody, either conservative or liberal or moderate, depending on the dynamics.
Right.
So, if there's many cases where, well, the most famous case, of course, was in Maine in 2018, which is what my piece is on. I talked to voters, I talked to reporters, I talked to election officials, and I told the story of how it happened in Maine. But in the congressional election, there was 4 candidates running. And the top 2, of course, was a Democrat and a Republican. And then there was a Green candidate and an independent candidate. And because in a similar situation where the Republican got like 48% and the Democrat maybe got 44%, I know I have these wrong a little bit, but in the end, the Democrat took the votes of the Green and the independent. They were their second choice. And he won with 50 versus 49 or something. And, unfortunately, Republicans, it was ranked choice voting stole the election from the GOP. Ranked choice voting is a Democratic scam and all that kind of stuff. But, the funny thing was, in the next state over, in New Hampshire, Kelly Ayotte lost to Maggie Hassan in the United States Senate. And that was a very big deal. Well, the reality is Maggie Hassan did not get 50% of the vote, and that there was a libertarian candidate to the very far right of Kelly Ayotte that, acted as the spoiler.
And would have given their vote to Ayotte. Would have gotten their vote for Ayotte. So they lost out on. So what you've proven is that is a pure system. We need to move on to the others, and that is. The other topic, I think the ranked choice voting is great, right? But if we continue to have very gerrymandered states,
yes.
States that are very gerrymandered, we still run into problems that ranked choice votings are incapable of solving because you have sort of ideological fusion.
Right. I mean, it all blends together. Everything builds on each other. no one of these problems is going to solve, none of these solutions are going to solve everything. So, I mean, I think we know the problem of gerrymandering. Just briefly, the politicians get to carve out the districts that they run in, and the controlling party gets to carve it in such a way that it distorts their power and marginalizes a lot of citizens. And because, they draw the craziest districts that, are 500 miles apart. They're all one thin line, or, they're boxing out people of color, etc. And that story's been told a lot. But what my film is about, my 10-minute piece, is the fact that it's all about citizen action that's going to get this done. And I highlighted the story in Michigan of a 20-something-year-old Katie Fahey who wrote on Facebook in 2016, hey, we've got to do something here. And it started a wave of 40,000 volunteers that got a referendum to change the Michigan's constitution. And now they have independent commissions.
Bodies, yeah.
That are going to design these. I mean, it's still a complicated process, but we know at least there's going to be a lot more fairness in there. And the thing to remember is that no one has the interest. It's not in the politician's interest to have gerrymandering reform. It's not in the politician's interest to have a ranked choice voting that gives you more choices. It's not in the politician's interest to, have campaigns publicly funded. And what the Katie Fahey story really shows is that it only can be the people. And the people are the only ones that have the interest to get this done. And it's us that has to do it.
And in other words, if we want gerrymandered ended, it's, first of all, that's a state issue, and we have to work within the state to get that done. And for those states that are very far apart, it's hard to get the Congress to do it. But years like this, and I don't know what you believe, I think years like this that are in such flux, I think is where those kinds of things can occur. Your thoughts?
Yeah. What are the things that are in flux? I apologize.
No, I'm saying years like this, where things are so disjointed, where things are, it looks like there's so much chaos. This is where it is more effective to really attempt doing these types of major changes.
Yes. Well, absolutely. I mean, to slightly switch the subject, the whole George Floyd situation and the protests, this is one wonderful opportunity, and I haven't really heard the talk about creating a constitutional amendment guaranteeing the right to vote. and I mean, these are clearly the times that we need to pay attention. And I guess I take of course, this is the time these are horrible times, but I guess I would slightly, not disagree, but I would point out that we can fight for justice. We can fight for against poverty. We can fight to improve the climate. We can really try to fight for all of these issues people care about. But I would point out that if you're not addressing the structural problems first, you're not going to be able to get the people in power that you need to address these problems. And so I would have a different spin. I would say that unfortunately, before we try to pass climate change legislation, we need to get money out of politics so that whatever that legislation looks like.
I don't think we disagreed at all. I mean, What I'm saying is that in times of flux like this, it's easier to pass those transformational changes you're talking about. Because I don't, in Texas, the governor is all over the place. The only way we could get something like this in Texas is because we're in such dire straits right now.
Well, I would say two things. Clearly, I don't want to make it a partisan thing, but clearly we need different power dynamics in the United States Senate, and we need power dynamics different in the presidency. And I do think also back to the state level, clearly the flux is a time to act, but at the same time, people on the left and the right agree with these. They agree with changing the status quo.
Agreed. Absolutely.
And this is the opportunity. I mean, as we move ahead, we are continually going to be breaking down, the two-party system institutions. We're going to be breaking down a lot of the industrial era kind of institutions, and there's going to be a flex in ideologies. And I think that I hope that the average Americans understand that issues like, getting money out of politics, and issues like fair, boundaries that work for the people and not the politicians. I hope that is just the norm with 80%, 90% of the citizens, and not, unfortunately, everyone wants to make it a partisan thing. But these issues resonate with everybody, and I think that's the opportunity.
Now, I was a board member of Move to Amend, where we worked on trying to get the 28th Amendment to get money out of politics and corporations are not people kind of a deal. We had a lot of sponsors, and one of the most important part of that group, that organization, is that we were completely non-partisan in the way we handled the 28th Amendment, because it was important to bring folks of all sides into that domain. And I think we were very effective of it, and we continue to get sponsors. It's just that the power of the corporatocracy is that huge that it's very hard to break through. But as people become smarter, as people like yourself make documentaries, as people go out there and hit the fields, as we do what I am doing and many others are doing, that are actually engaging and showing people their worth and their ability to make real change, as people assert their worth, they're going to see that, I can actually do this.
And that's the other message, is that I made this not for a bunch of people to watch on the internet. I made this for grassroots activists to take this out to the churches and into the different living rooms in your community, and to talk to people and to show, this is how we're going to get this message out. It isn't going to be through, the corporate media and what have you. So that's why I made these little bite-sized documentaries. And you're right. You and I are in the same business, and we're both getting rich on it, aren't we?
We wish. Actually, I tell you, to do this, you really have to have a passion for humanity, and you also have to have a passion for seeing a government that works. We're not the type that says government is bad. We're the type that says we want effective government. Irrespective of ideology, we want effective government. Kevin Bowe, what would you have liked me to ask you that you want to put out there?
Sure. Well, where could people find the documentary? It's on my website, Democracy Through the Looking Glass, which both will have the American Spring series, but also my other film, Democracy Through the Looking Glass, which is a very dark look at the dystopian world of 2016. Not that the world has gotten any better, but you will find American Spring to be a little bit more optimistic than 2016. No, I greatly appreciate your time, and we had a great conversation. I hope you enjoyed it yourself.
Well, let me tell you, first of all, all the links to your website, to your product, is going to be on an individual post that we're going to put out there for you, because this is important work that you're doing. This will be broadcast likely live tomorrow, and that broadcast as well will have all the information for your website. So thank you so kindly for having been here, Kevin Bowe, and keep up the great work. We need a lot of people doing this and making sure to give all the exposure possible to change this country, because that we've got to do.
Appreciate that. Good seeing you again.
Great.
I'm Egberto Wood. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. We spoke about that last night, had a good conversation. Anyhow, folks, let me go ahead and welcome everybody. Michael Rudnan, welcome aboard. AVQ, welcome aboard. Bruce Pillard, Sir Wesley 08. Norman Reynolds. Para ver. Rose Williams. Let's see. Anybody else? Yes, Tom Hines. How are you doing, Tom? You like public finances in time? Okay, we'll talk about that. Let's see. There's also York Gibson. Welcome aboard. So, York Gibson, you want Trump in 2020? Why don't you give me a call? Telephone number is what is the telephone number? 346-248-7799. Code 254-600-9091. Give us a call. Love to talk to you and see for you to give a reason that you think strongly that Trump has been very good in what he has done thus far for America and deserves to have a second run at it. So why don't you give us a call? Let's talk about it. So that's York Gibson, Michael Rudney. Well, I called Michael already. AVQ, I think I called already as well. All right, Egberto, you didn't include the links in this video's description. Like I told him, I'm writing the blog that will extract his interview per se, his interview proper. And what I'm going to do with that is I'll then go ahead and make sure that everybody has access to his full thing. Because again, we want to make sure that that guys like this guy gets the kudos that he needs or should get. So running it is coming. It is coming. I had a very busy morning because I had an interview with John Perkins this morning, so that kind of threw us off a little bit. Okay, let's go to the questions, or let's see. Trump pushing ACA repeal again. Republicans have been pushing repeal and replace for years, but unlike we progressives who would establish single-payer Medicare for all to phase out private insurance and better regulate big pharma's price gouging, they don't have a replacement on offer. The result will be tens of millions of Americans kicked off the health care rolls during a pandemic, resulting in tens of thousands of additional debt. This goes beyond heartless. Let me tell you something. The Supreme Court has been, in as much as it's a conservative Supreme Court, it has been very measured. And you know, if I say the Supreme Court has been measured, it must be measured. I don't like conservative Supreme Courts, but this one has, it seems like every time they needed to prevent catastrophe, John Roberts has been the sensible one on the court to prevent catastrophe. I can almost rest you assured that they won't be overturning Obamacare. You're correct. It would be cruel. You're watching on YouTube, AVQ. Houston is rising fast. Yes, Bruce. The infection rate in Houston is rising. We are now at level 1. I just saw that on Hidalgo's website. Look, take care of yourself. A lot of people are saying, I saw some things on a few websites yesterday say, oh, we're all going to get it. We don't all have to get it, okay? We don't all have to get it. Take care of yourself. Wear your masks and don't go out unless you need to go out, and keep a close circle of only, if you're going to see anybody, make sure they're in your circle. Make sure that you know that there's no permutation. I mean, people that you trust, that there's no permutations of what they've done either. My daughter was sending us some sites. Actually, she sent us a Instagram thing that points out, I don't remember what they call it, but in effect, it is something like circles of trust that no one is supposed to break. Circles of trust. And they've created their circle of trust. And in one case, one person, I think, had broken it and they were kicked out of the circle of trust. So just kind of remember that. And they were kicked out because they actually said, well, they went and did something. And they said, well, even though you're telling us the circle of trust has been broken, bye-bye. Until 14 days quarantine or whatever. Okay, Michael Rudden, for after the show, an animated clip from Perkins' economic hit. Okay, I love that. But beforehand, you know what? I should have. Let me finish this, and then I may have a couple of minutes I can play that. The vaccine, the numbers. Hello, Norman, and hello, Sir Wesley. There is no vaccine. The numbers indicate the temporary decline in coronavirus cases is on the rebound and going up. Yep. What did he say as a response? Freedom to die and to kill others to alleviate suicide. Norman, You see, the problem about it is you're too smart. Not even this guy saw the stupor with on what he was saying when he said that. You're talking about the vice president. For those who don't understand what Norman is talking about. Okay, Michael Rudden says John Hopkins data indicates 7-day rolling average show we have more cases now than at the peak in April. That's a shame, but it's true. Rose, hello, Rose, our copy editor. Welcome, Rose. Thank you so kindly, folks. Give Rose a hand, a big hand. Yesterday, she heard my cries that I was burning at both ends, and she said, "Egberto, I will help you copy edit." And you know what? So I know that we have talent, great talent. So thank you, Rose. I appreciate that from the depths of my heart. You know we love you out here. Let's see. Rose says, they keep on saying that hopefully, why is our green screen content messing up? This must be a bug in the software. Okay, they keep saying that hopefully they will have a vaccine soon, but they've been working on vaccines for SARS and MERS for years, and they still don't have anything for those types of coronaviruses. Developing a vaccine for a new type of virus typically takes years. Our hopes that CRISPR and other new technologies may give boost, but there's absolutely no guarantee. But you know what? People have to start thinking about this. There's no vaccine for AIDS. There's no vaccines for a lot of things. So for us to simply believe that there's going to be a vaccine for coronavirus, I don't know. Isn't the coronavirus in sort of this? Well, it's not a rhinovirus, I guess. But I mean, so we don't know. And not only that, we don't know that. We don't know if that we can ever really develop an immunity to it, so, which means, here's the thing that you have to think about, right? If we can't develop an immunity to it, it may be a virus that only those who have their body chemistry that can fight it, like those who currently get it and survive, that's all we're left with. Who knows? Maybe that's what it's going to be. And in that case, that's not good news for a lot of people, because it would mean that we will be wiping out a particular percentage of the population. We will be wiping out a percentage of the population. If there are some that will never gain immunity to it, who knows? I don't know. But we have smart people working, and hopefully with a new administration, we'll pour what we need to pour into it to get it done. Rose Williams says, money in politics definitely number one without addressing the problem. That's absolutely true. I'm not convinced about I don't believe in term limits. I tell people that all the time. A lot of folks want term limits. I bless you, those of you who want term limits. I think term limits is anti-democratic, but, we have term limits for the president. Even that I don't agree with. But, hey, what can I say? That's just me. I would not die on the sword fighting that particular issue. Gerrymandering can be solved with shortest split line enforced at the level. Oh, wait. Michael said, with $100 coupons for every citizen to donate to the politicians of their choice. That's a good way to do I agree with that. I think that's been that's been out there for a while as well. Gerrymandering can be solved with the shortest split line enforcing the federal level. I'd have to look at that YouTube. I don't understand it. The one thing about ranked choice voting is there should be one extra spot for no confidence. If no confidence gets the majority, the election is scrapped. All candidates eliminated from contention, including the incumbent, and a special election retried a few months later. That's a thought. And that eliminates that theory that we have about voting for the best of all evils, right? The preferred evil. That's something to think about. Bruce, do we need a constitutional amendment for ranked choice? Can we build it into the Electoral College fix? I don't think we need a constitutional. We don't need a constitutional thing for that at all, because I don't think the Constitution says how the vote process must occur. And not only that, the voting process, I think it's actually at the state level, unless there is something that the federal government does that supersedes that state level. We have to look into state rights and empowerment of states and that kind of stuff. I'm not sure how that would work for voting, but I don't think that is on anything on the federal level, or that would require a constitutional amendment. Michael Run, last year there was a poll which indicated 2% of Americans think their elections work all the time. Let's see. Let me get down here. Egberto include, yes, I'll do that, Rudnin. Let me scroll down because I want, before I finish here, Rose, you're exactly right. No vaccine for some viruses, but one of the points I'm trying to make is that so far we've been unsuccessful with other. You're correct about that. Let's see. There is talk on Morning Joe that they think Trump may pull an LBJ and drop out. I heard that today from that guy in Louisiana that's married to the, that crazy Democrat. Can't remember his name. I think if the polls keep going like that, that just may happen. And if that happens, though, Democrats would be in trouble because they will only pull Donald Trump with somebody like Romney, and I think that's what Romney was setting up for. When Romney went and marched with Black Lives Matter, when Romney was one of the only ones that bucked Donald Trump, I think that's the card Romney was playing, and I actually said that on one of our Politics Done Right show, that I do think that Romney was already playing that card, that Donald Trump may have to drop out, and that, and if Donald Trump drop out, it also means that more than likely the vice president is tainted. So we'll see. There's still a lot of time for that. There's still a lot of time for, and Donald Trump loves dramatics. So I can foresee him going into Jacksonville, Florida, going on stage and anointing somebody for that. It's definitely a possibility. Okay, let's see what else there is. I don't think there's anything more other than to say, folks, I thank you so kindly for visiting us at Politics Done Right. I know you have choices. Please do remember to support our show. We need your support. Please go to Politics Done Right. Rather, go to patreon.com/Politics Done Right. Again, that is patreon.com/Politics Done Right. That way you can ensure that we are on air for a very long time. Here it goes. That is the link that I just entered. You can also go to paypal.me/Politics Done Right. And here's the link, paypal.me/Politics Done Right. If you are on YouTube, you can always super chat me if you're so kindly inclined. And you can visit our store.politicsdoneright.com. And I need to do this rather quickly. One of my two books that are in print, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, and Lose Weight and Be Fit. All these things will help support Politics Done Right and our continued bringing the information and doing what's necessary. You'll also get cups, T-shirts, all the good stuff that we have there. You can actually find there as well. So please consider supporting it at one of those links that I just inserted there. My name is Egberto Willies, and I forgot to put the store on, but here it is. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you all know how I end this baby. I am what? Out! Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.